November 3rd, 2023. A day that is pretty important in the history of World of Warcraft, and perhaps my own as well. The first BlizzCon in 4 years is held in Anaheim, California after setbacks from the pandemic and the Blizzard lawsuit, and fans are eager to see what's next for the future of the Warcraft franchise. From my dorm living room, I tune in to the online show to see what's going on in Classic WoW. Updates to Hardcore mode, the end of Wrath of the Lich King Classic, and the expected shift forward to Cataclysm Classic. All pretty standard stuff. But before passing things off to Chris Metzen and the Retail WoW squad, there is one more announcement. A new seasonal game mode, promising to dramatically shake up the typical Classic game by implementing new runes, gradual leveling brackets starting at level 25, new raids, and more. After weeks of rumors leading up to BlizzCon, and let's face it, years of calls by the fans for a Classic 2 or a Classic Plus, Season of Discovery was promoted to be just that, with a screenshot teasing future Scarlet Citadel and Karazhan Crypt's raids, and developer Josh Greenfield even ending with the knowing phrase, "It's everything we love about Classic, plus so much more." Like a lot of Classic players, I was intrigued, but unlike many of them, this hype train had a different sort of appeal to me. After over 10 years of growing up on private Wrath of the Lich King servers, this was going to be my chance to experience Classic in full. On the eve of the release, I activated my subscription, downloaded the client, and the next day, jumped into a new World of Warcraft. 9 months, 4 phases, and 60 levels later, what's become of all this? A lot of good, but also plenty left to be desired. And in lieu of a Phase 4 review like I've done for previous phases, I want to take a more holistic look at Season of Discovery and unmask its successes and shortcomings, going through the details of each phase. SOD is not all bad, nor is it all good, so I hope you'll consider my balanced take worthwhile. This video will include my own opinions and experiences on a PvE server, but I want to incorporate both the positive and negative attitudes of the community as well to truly understand how this season has resonated with fans over the last 9 months. Regardless of what happens in Phase 5 and beyond, I think a lot of the critiques and points I highlight here will stay relevant and might become even more important in the future. As always, thank you for the support, stay friendly down in the comments, and with all that being said, let's get right into it. November 30th, 2023, everyone is off to the races. Leveling to 25 is mostly standard, but tracking down the 12 unique runes gives players new and exciting objectives to complete throughout the early zones, allowing them to acquire new and powerful spells in the process. Many of these runes added small bits of lore or flavor to each class, helping build on that idea of class identity so integral to Classic WoW. For me, I can confidently say collecting reagents for a dark ritual, hunting down unique soul shards, and even eating a slice of pie oozing with fell energy were all so Warlock-esque, perfect for bringing back that classic role-playing feel. With no public test realm beforehand, this was also one of the least data-mined versions of WoW ever made, though within a day or two, guides for all the runes could easily be found on YouTube and WoWhead. While some of the runes could be easily pieced together while doing normal questing, others were so obscure they essentially made using online sources a requirement. As a result, the key system in this new season, while cool and unique, was soon relegated to a list of hidden bonus quests you could just look up outside the game, and this was a pattern we'd see going forward into future phases. Despite this disconnect between playing WoW and actually being able to find the new abilities, the server populations seemed really solid after launch, and a lot of players were flocking back to the game to try out this new experience. At level 25, players eagerly jumped into the upgraded Black Fathom Deep's 10-person raid, complete with new boss mechanics, loot, and secrets compared to its original 5-person form. I thought the raid was a success, and with all the changes, it didn't seem like most players minded it occupied the same digital space as an old dungeon. The nearby Ashenvale PvP was more of a mixed bag, with exploits and over-optimization leading to waves of bug fixes in the weeks after launch, but it was certainly a helpful supplement to earning Silverwing reputation, and we even got a new mount out of it, which I thought was a cool reward. As a few side notes, the new Commerce Authority faction, which incentivized you to make items with professions or buy them on the auction house, was a really cool idea to stimulate the digital economy, though I felt the gold and reputation rewards weren't quite worth what I was paying for some of the more pricey craft products. There was also a noticeable lack of new quests or items to discover apart from those related to runes. But hey, we were just at level 25, plenty of time to get things rolling. Phase 1 was overall really promising, and I was looking forward to the next phase to see more runes, unique encounters, and new locations to explore. February 8th, 2024. The push to level 40 kicked off with a surprising new quest, the Hunt for the Cozy Sleeping Bag. This item required a lengthy travel around both Kalimdor and the Eastern Kingdoms, a 10 out of 10 win for world exploration, and it rewarded you with the ability to rest inside your very own sleeping bag, boosting your XP by 3% for a few hours, a buff that would become all the more valuable at higher levels. With 6 more runes to discover, travel in the open world meant there were some new secrets to look forward to, including a distant visit to the Arathi Dwarven Farm, which I thought was a fun use of a forgotten area. There were also a few spellbooks within the newly opened Scarlet Monastery that provided quality of life spells not directly linked to runes, though some runes were later reorganized into these spellbooks. I think most of us can agree the Hunt for the Dark Riders was the ultimate rune journey in this phase, and tied in nicely to the emerging storyline for Karazhan and Deadwind Pass, but in terms of actual content here, only time will tell if more secrets are revealed. At max level, the path once again turned to either raiding or the new PvP system. Gnomeregan, a large dungeon retrofitted into another 10-person raid, was a jump up in difficulty, but was also quite enjoyable, and the loot here perfectly encapsulated the steampunk, whimsical nature of the once mighty gnomes. In the far south, Stranglethorn Vale offered a unique type of player versus player combat, the Blood Moon. Here, all players had the opportunity to turn against their own faction, grouping up only within a 5-person team to earn blood coins by defeating enemies and turning in your tribute points to one of the shrines located around the zone. With quicker respawns and a speed boost after rezzing, the jungle turned into a hectic rush for blood points that could either go really well or really poorly depending on your group. As someone who prefers the PvE experiences of the game, PvP isn't really my thing, but the event seemed to go pretty well overall in this phase, despite early attempts to optimize the wins by just spamming Rain of Fire at the shrines. Phase 2 might have not had quite the impact as Phase 1, but there was still enough content to sustain its 2-month life cycle. What we got next, though, would prove to be much more divisive, and definitely not sufficient content for the timeline or the player base. April 4th, 2024. 10 more levels to conquer, 6 new runes, a new raid, and wow, that is a lot of level 50s running around on day 1. What's going on? Oh yeah, Nightmare Incursions. In this phase, players could now venture through the 4 original Nightmare portals from vanilla to discover a green-tinted version of Azeroth filled with creatures, quests, and bosses. Finally, the closest thing to a new zone in SOD. Not bad, right? Actually pretty bad. The quests, despite having a janky sharing system, were repeatable as many times a day as you wanted to complete them, not to mention granting an outlandish amount of XP each time, meaning early adopters of these incursions were able to rush to level 50 within the first few hours, effectively spoiling the classic experience in this regard. Though the XP was greatly nerfed within the first few days, players still made an effort to optimize runs within the Nightmare to grind out levels much faster than questing out in the open world. This incident, coupled with the Sunken Temple 20-person raid being way overtuned at launch, made for a messy start to the phase, with many describing this as a low point for the game. The Discoverer's Delight buff was also added to every character by default with the launch, once again accelerating the leveling journey to what I believe was an unnecessary degree. Maybe allowing the buff as an alt catch-up mechanic would have been more appropriate, but it seemed weird to me to shoehorn this in when it is very doable to reach higher levels without the buff or incursions, especially when combining world quests and dungeons. The runes in this phase continued with similar patterns as before, some of them totally standalone adventures, others tied to reputations or newly unlocked dungeons. The Shadowtooth Emissary was a welcome addition, introducing the Wild Offering system that incentivized you to run some of the high-level dungeons to barter for a rune and specific pieces of gear. This established a dungeon-based gameplay loop that would later be revised into the Undermine Real system in Phase 4. Even with this little bit of worthwhile, repeatable content, this phase dragged on for nearly a month longer than the last, and it probably shouldn't have. I was busy with college finals at this time, and even taking a week or two off still left me feeling like there wasn't enough to do. Sunken Temple was cool, doing my level 50 class quests was satisfying, and the runes were still pretty neat, but when the incursion system, the flagship event for the phase, ends up being a total flop for most players, it just doesn't work. Not to mention the Blood Moon PvP was recycled with not much new to offer. As with pretty much anything I talk about, I'm not certain on the behind-the-scenes elements of game production, but I can't help but think something was way off at Blizzard that caused the phase to drag on for so long. Phase 3 certainly took a hit to the player population, and it was going to take a lot to bring things back to a high at level 60. July 11th, 2024. Phase 4 is a go, and at long last, we can head all the way to 60, a fabled prize in this season of level caps and gated content. We got new runes of course, including some for our ring items that increased stats for certain weapons or types of spells, a customization option that helped buff various stats like spell hit chance or weapon skills. The 3 other mainline runes I felt dropped off a bit in terms of novelty, with some of the same mechanics from earlier phases like the Fell Rifts or the Shadow Altar being reused, now just in higher level areas. As I mentioned, the Undermine Real currency has been pretty successful, allowing everybody who ventures into high level dungeons to work toward purchasing the Tier 0 gear set, a casual friendly change that pivots away from having to grind for even a chance at winning a piece of gear. Speaking of high level dungeons, we finally got our first truly new instance, or at least as new as we've seen in Season of Discovery. Following a short attunement quest from our friend the Shadowtooth Emissary, you can now uncover a secret instance portal in Demonfall Canyon, once a level 30 quest area, now reimagined as a level 60 dungeon with brand new bosses, mechanics, and awesome rewards. With so much content to try out in this phase, I think this new option was overshadowed a bit by all the other stuff going on, but it was still good to know the devs aren't completely ignoring the idea of adding brand new encounters. The Blackrock Eruption event is also thematically cool, but as a casual player I really just bypassed it and didn't see a huge benefit of trying it out, so I just enjoyed the scenery as I flew through the Searing Gorge. There have been lots of other changes going on in this phase too, and I'm not an expert in all of them, but some that turned heads a few weeks ago were the bugs that bled from Season of Discovery into the other game modes like Hardcore and Permanent Classic Era. These even included one of the Paladin runes being available across all servers for a short period of time, a blatant gameplay issue. I won't get into the other set of controversial changes that were apparently intentional but were later rolled back after criticism, but it's clear that tampering with the classic code to create SOD can be a massive headache for the devs. Despite these issues, I think Phase 4 has been a bit of a renaissance for the game, and provided Blizzard keeps the momentum rolling, pushing forward with a mix of truly new content and the vanilla patch schedule could sustain it for a while, but I do ponder what they're going to do to keep pitching runes as the new system now that we're at max level. At the moment, it seems most players are enjoying the regular classic endgame more than any of the SOD bonus features, calling into question what the benefit is right now of SOD over just running some classic Fresh Realm. I personally have really enjoyed this phase, from joining a fun new guild, to completing a ton of high-level quest lines for the first time, to even earning an elusive Zorathian Dreadsteed in the depths of Dire Maul. But having fun and considering the true potential of a game are two separate goals, and I want now to consider the crux of this video, the dark side of Discovery, and where I think Sod really shows some lost promise from what it could have been. Real early on, when the hype of Season of Discovery was well underway, I remember seeing a trailer for the game that said something like, new hidden locations to discover, with new enemies and encounters too. That was when the switch flipped for me. A lore and map nerd, the idea of those vast mountain ranges, locked gates, uncharted islands and more finally being mapped out and showcased in all their classic glory. That was a little misleading, and yeah, a bit of a foolish idea on my part, thinking that new zones, continents, or even those promised new hidden areas could actually happen here. The truth is, not only is Season of Discovery not really doing these things, it functionally cannot do them. Sod is run on the WoW Classic client, meaning when you boot up your game to play Classic Era, Hardcore, or Sod, you're essentially running the same software, just connecting to a different server. This means, from a technical perspective, that a lot of the files stored on your computer from the map of Azeroth we play in to the user interface cannot easily be changed for one of these versions without severely messing up the others. From what we've seen recently, even the server-side things like quests, items, runes, and buffs unique to Sod can bleed over and cause other problems. Server-side objects are loaded in to create a facade of new stuff, and phasing is used to double book areas like the Nightmare Incursion zones to create the illusion of new unexplored territory, but the base plate is the same. And painting over it with these other types of objects, in my opinion, is not polished Blizzard quality. I like Season of Discovery, partially because it was my first full experience with Classic as a game, but it now exists for me within the frame of reference that it's a playground, a testing area for the devs who are shackled to the Classic client, unable to truly expand upon the world and tell meaningful stories in new places until a new separate client is invested in. Is there even going to be something more after Sod, a truer reflection of a Classic Plus, or is this really all there will ever be? In either case, we also shouldn't let the devs off the hook with the excuse of, well, they had to work with the Classic client, they did the best they could. There are dozens, if not hundreds, of unfinished quests or low-hanging opportunities for new little things to be added to the game, and I'm willing to bet very few of them were actually addressed in Sod. Remember how I said earlier that pretty much all the new quests related back to runes? What about the original Aranicus quest? Or the Azshara pirate shipwreck? Quests are largely server-side entities, so what's really stopping Blizz from letting us discover new things through questing and exploring the open world instead of just bottlenecking us into a new flashy rune system? I don't have all the answers, but I thought I'd just put that out there. It's been a fun ride, but Season of Discovery for me seems to be running out of time to hit that next level of impact, if it hasn't already. Perhaps it's a case of too little too late, and a combination of factors have probably contributed to that. As a test run for something greater, it hasn't been half bad, and I think the Phase 4 community is doing alright, but simultaneously positioning Sod as both a seasonal fling and the gateway to these major new classic additions is, in my opinion, a big disconnect, and one that is going to disenfranchise fans who enjoy the simple questing, exploration, and leveling, and who desired more of it. I'm not entirely sure how to end this video, but I hope I've given you a lot to think about and reflect on regarding Season of Discovery. Like I've said, not all good and not all bad, but hopefully Blizzard can learn some lessons here and put that insight into a future version of WoW. And hey, for those of you who never tried Sod, dropped out, or plan on maybe doing so soon, that's okay. And Classic Era and private servers are still there for those interested. Whether we end up getting a real Classic Plus in the future or not, this has certainly been an interesting chapter in WoW history, and I'm really grateful I've been able to share my experiences with all of you. Thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, may the Force be with you.